Hello everyone. The afternoon session of the 14th Global RCE Conference is about to begin. Once again, I will be the moderator for today's session. I am Yu Yoshino at Notre Dame Seishin University in the Faculty of Letters, Department of English Language and Literature. Thank you so much for your cooperation. Members of the public are also invited to participate in plenary session 2. Now, let's begin. The moderator is Dr. Nafisa Insebayaba. Best wishes.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone got to enjoy their lunch, right? And is very energized and not sleepy at all for plenary session 2. We have very exciting speakers today, and we will be talking about multi-stakeholder collaboration. But before we jump right into that, reminder about our beautiful QR code. Please scan and answer our 5 really brief questions, which will help guide our discussion today. Yes, so first let me introduce myself. My name is Nafisa Insebayaba. I'm a researcher at UNUIS in RC Global Service Center, and I'm very happy to see so many familiar and new faces here in the audience today. So as the title suggests, you can see it in your booklets in the conference program. We will be exploring the critical role of multi-stakeholder collaboration in advancing ESD both within our RC Global Network and beyond. In this session, our guiding question for this discussion is, as we look towards the future, what practices in multi-stakeholder collaboration, both within and between RCEs, should we keep, stop, or introduce? We have 5 brilliant speakers here today from diverse sectors and geographies who will reflect on both opportunities and challenges of multi-stakeholder collaboration based on their local circumstances and realities. So in this session, we aim to move beyond the general discussion of what would be nice to do, right? And focus on specific strategies that you can take away and implement in your local environments. So I hope that everybody will be taking notes for some tips. All right, so we will be highlighting specific strategies and lessons learned that can help foster effective multi-stakeholder collaboration and generate ideas of how these partnerships can be rebuilt and reimaged in the upcoming decades. This session will start with quick 5-minute case spotlights by our speakers, and then we will move on to the more interactive session and Q&A. So we look forward to your participation, and we can start. I see that almost 100 people answered our survey. I'm really glad to see that. Yeah, we'll give a round of applause to our room. Almost everybody, if not everybody, responded. Let's start with the first question. Which sector have you worked with the most in your respective RC or organization? We can see that 62% responded education or academia, which is interesting because based on plenary session 1, we learned that the leaders of RC projects are now NGOs, right? So NGOs and education must work together to move the ESD agenda forward. Private sector, unfortunately, only 11%. So we're happy to have our speaker from RC Fryslân, who will be talking about what are some of the barriers of cooperating with the private sector and what can we do to really move this partnership forward. Local and indigenous communities. We also heard during the keynote speech the importance of really targeting and taking into account the traditional knowledge and indigenous people when implementing ESD projects on the ground. So it will be an interesting aspect to look at as well. And of course, youth, 42%. So very important stakeholders and participants, drivers of change of ESD projects, and we will be reflecting on their role in this plenary session as well. However, we also have plenary session 3, specifically focused on youth tomorrow, so I hope you all are looking forward to that as well. All right, without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. So I will be introducing panelists one by one so that you do not forget who they are. And they will be reflecting on successful or not so successful, but learned from projects from their local environments of multi-stakeholder collaboration successes, maybe lessons or challenges, and impacts. So our first speaker is Saki Kaneda, representing our CEO Okayama and the youth sector, let's call it that. Saki Kaneda currently works as an English teacher at a UNESCO-associated school in Okayama Prefecture, which she is also a graduate of. As a teacher, Saki promotes project-based learning through collaboration with universities and companies, and aims to enhance not only students' knowledge, but also their critical thinking skills. Saki, the floor is yours. Give a round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Saki Kaneda. I'm here as a youth. Today, I'm going to introduce about what I was doing when I was high school student, and also I am a teacher right now. So maybe you can imagine why I am here. So I'm going to introduce about the platform about the UNESCO ASP network in Okayama City. We have 11 high schools, and we have one big event once a year. And also prepare meeting, we have twice a year towards the practical meeting. And this platform is organized by the host school teacher and also Okayama University, Okayama City, and so on. And also I was involved here as a OB and OG student when I was a university student. Maybe somebody realized I am there, the bottom of the picture. That was the 15 years old when I was a high school student, and now I am 26 and as a teacher. So let me introduce about the platform in Okayama. We have host school teachers and students set up the year theme and also the workflow in around April or May or something like that. And then after the students were coming together around the summer vacation also, and then students try to run and get the topic and get some knowledge. And after that, in November, we have practical exchanging meeting. Students were going to present what they are doing in the school with their student, friends, and also students will exchange their opinion and collaborate with others. For example, last year we did workshop about the food shortage. But not only presenting what they are doing in the school, but also students trying to expand their project by collaborate with local organizations. Or, for example, my school went to the field work after we learned the disasters in Okayama Prefecture. The next slide is about how successful this platform for high school students. I feel 3 main points about this. The first one is achieve the aim and mission, because each school has strong network and partnerships, so having a running opportunities by whole school approaching local organization and companies work together. This is the biggest thing. The second one is think from variety of point of views, because each year decided the theme. So students can learn about the year theme. For example, in Japan, high school students has to be 3 years. So if the students coming year and year and year, they run about the three main topics about the SDGs. The third one is keep collaborating with OB and OG. As I talked before, I was a student in the UNESCO school, and I learned in this platform, and then grew up, and also went to the local university, and I joined this platform as an OG. And then I coming back to the teacher to teach this platform and also the SDGs or something like that to the students. However, we still need to struggling with these issues. First one is how can we involve all the teachers and how can we collaborate with other subjects? For example, I am an English teacher, but it's very hard to collaborate with social societies or PEs and something like that because it's depending on the subject teacher. And also we have to follow the curriculum by the Ministry of the Education. So it's very hard to collaborate in the school subject. And also we need to keep thinking about creating new materials or new points of view. As I said before, students has to be followed by the textbook or something like that. But I hope students has to be keep thinking on their own about the world issues, especially SDGs or ESD. Finally, I would like you to introduce about what I'm thinking right now. We have to be co-creating platform to live together in the one society. So in local community, we have UNESCO school, universities, board of education, and local companies supported by specialists and students who are interested in SDGs or ESD fields. So we should collaborate with each other stronger. That's what I'm thinking right now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Saki. I think we have a very unique perspective here, not only the perspective of local teachers in Japan, but also I've heard some people mention that they have been to previous RC conferences back in 2005, 2014 as experts, right? But here we have a person who first participated in ESD projects as a student and now is continuing this sort of cycle of pushing ESD forward as a teacher. So we're very excited to hear from Saki during the Q&A as well. So for the second speaker, on behalf of the higher education institutions, education and academia, I would like to invite Abdul Husaini from RC Minna in Nigeria. Dr. Abdul Husaini is the coordinator, co-founder of RC Minna. He currently serves as the permanent secretary in Niger State at the Ministry of Lands and Survey in Nigeria. And through RC Minna, he has led many sustainability, youth empowerment initiatives focusing on ESD and inclusive urban transformation. So Abdul, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I have a very, should I say, clear presentation to make here, translating academic knowledge into real-world solution. From the beginning, I think the main objective of RC, wherever they are formed, just like Professor Zulkif mentioned, is to provide solution from local level that can be scaled up. And I always like this slogan of this university in Indonesia, locally grounded, globally respected, something like that. So the idea of RC is to provide basis whereby you can catalyze ideas that community will use in solving problem. So I will try to look at some of this and how can academia or the institution provide us support to achieve some of this thing that we're looking at. What we have done here is to look at some of the few things we have done at RCE level in Minna that look very simple, cost less. And to some extent, we've been able to maybe impact on the community. So academic knowledge must move beyond classroom and journals. Just like Professor mentioned, we have to look at things. What are the problems within our regions? How can we find solutions to some of these problems? And these solutions should be seen to be very efficacious that can solve problems so that people can now get the result. And we know in almost every communities across, especially in Africa, are facing issues like youth restiveness, environmental decline, like I think last session we were talking about climate change and so on and so forth. So we look at some of this in what are the local issues in Minna that we can solve. Interestingly, when we are looking for acknowledgement in 2007, 8, 9, before getting acknowledgement in 2011, we started with financial literacy. How do we change the narrative, people to be saving money? This looks very simple, but very important. Then we look at environmental degradation. How do we have a system of conserving our environment using local material? So we initiated so many research programs. So RC Minna bridges research with practice through participatory approach. We initiate discussion with people, we discuss the idea, develop it, and then we now go to the field. Not that somebody will do it, and then we see the result, and then we translate that into large-scale application. So we have some example in Minna, for instance, which tomorrow I have a presentation. I think one of my youth representatives will make a presentation on the same thing also. But just to show, sometimes identify this problem in your environment. Don't just mention, don't lament, provide solution, and make sure it works. And that is when the issue of this expertise in RCEs will work. Regional centers expertise on education for social development, regional center, this expertise is localized. What are your issues? How can you solve them? And then think, provide solution, and make sure it works. So we look at all of this. For instance, SIRA, youth building and reintegration, Green Fingers project, very simple, Green Fingers, early childhood sustainability education between the age of 5-7. And then SENSA, school environmental nutrition supplementation through agriculture. We go to school and you can see from, that for SENSA, 3 central district, 90 fruit trees, and so on and so forth. What does that mean? Just to teach students what they can do within their environment, from tree to fruit trees to vegetable, and then let that be used to help them survive better. And then cemetery. This is something that we all know very well. Most of these universities, we have researches, just like Professor mentioned. You go to a library, you see so many research projects, but how many have they implemented? 0. I was discussing with my colleagues that we came from Nigeria that go to University of Planning, for instance, in Nigeria. You see so many documents on cemetery planning, but you won't see that planning in the cemetery. So here at RC Minna, we demonstrated that we started this in 2016. I remember during the Africa RC meeting in Tebe, we made a presentation and we took it through. Today, I am proud to announce, as at last week, we had approval of about 100 million naira for the purpose of what? Implementing improvement in cemeteries around. And this started from a very simple idea. RCEs can show the way by doing some of these things. So applying planning to graveyard of Minna for the first time, which is showing dignity to the dead and improving the environment and protecting the environment. So we also have Minna urban regeneration through acupuncture. These are issues when you say you are an expert, show how expertise in your community. And then the Green Initiative, whereby we planted trees and we challenge the student, whoever maintain a tree over a year, there will be something. And we took that for granted. We planted the trees. And then when the following year, World Environmental Day came, we were challenged. We told them they will count the number of trees, and we went. They were protecting these trees because we promised a token. These are things that you can do to get some of these things work. And then we have about 5 hectares of land that we are using to teach our younger ones that you can see here, how to plant, how to maintain, and then so that they will grow with that. When you are celebrating birthday, instead of cake, you plant a tree. Your second birthday, another tree. So when you are 30 years, you have a tree that's almost 30 years. The idea is you keep doing something that will bring about what sustainability and improvement in the quality of your environment. I think that is the thinking that is something. So what are the key steps in translating knowledge? Of course, almost all of us agree with this. Co-creation with communities. Not to say you know, but let's agree on what we know. How do we implement it? Policy linkage with national and subnational. This is the mistake we are making. Most of these African RCs, or most RCs, I think it's not even in Africa, across, funding is the problem. Believe me, nobody will give you money if you can solve problem. But if you have solution, there are people that will come to you. And I think that is how we need to collaborate to know how to work to get support. And then we need to also have this idea, capacity building is very important in whatever we do. Without capacity, believe me, the world, we say it's a global village, but what? We need to move. Communication advocacy, we need to know how to communicate. This is a very important issue. If you don't know how to communicate, you cannot be seen, you cannot be heard, and you cannot be respected. This is very important that we need to take. Then looking forward, we need to keep participatory approaches that center on community voices. We need to adapt academic research to be solution-driven, not just for academic, not only for just like Professor mentioned, to gain point. And then we need to also strengthen institutions so that sustainability learning should be something that we need to all imbibe. And then we must ensure knowledge lives in community, not just in classroom. This is something very important that we need to understand. And that is the only way to move forward. And that's why we must start with the kids. We need to show them what to do, how to do, and also learn from them. They may have their own plan. I think that is all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A few very important points. The first point being, how do we teach about sustainability and climate change in a way that wouldn't just increase knowledge, right, or awareness among people, but actually change behaviors and contribute to creating solutions? And this is something that we as RC Global Service Center were also very passionate about. And actually, we developed a toolkit for teachers because Abdul, you mentioned that capacity building for teachers is very important. So those of you who are interested in that, tomorrow we will have a capacity building workshop specifically on action-oriented learning based on the practices implemented by RCEs around the world. So those of you who are interested, please join us during that session. Now moving on to the next speaker. Our third speaker is David Zandvliet from RCE British Columbia, who is a professor at Simon Fraser University and holds the UNESCO Chair in Biocultural Diversity and Education. David is also the founding director for the Institute for Environmental Learning, the Secretariat of the RCE British Columbia, based in Canada. And David leads environmental education programming at his university, including directing field schools in diverse locations, including Canada, US, Indonesia, Tanzania, and Australia. So David, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm representing my RCE, which is the Institute for Environmental Learning. Environmental learning is the term we use for ESD in a lot of Canada. And I'm going to share, I guess, just one main project that has been a focus of the last 2 or 3 years, kind of an all-encompassing project, which we literally just finished. I heard from the government printer just this morning that our document went to print. So I'm very excited about that. So the co-director of our RCE is Shannon Leddy. She's at University of British Columbia. She's a Métis scholar, Indigenous scholar. I've known her for many years. We've worked together for probably 15 years. And, you know, this has actually been key to our project. I got 2 other images here. I really wish the one here by Curtis Wilson, he's an Indigenous artist. I really wish that was the Canadian flag because it sort of represents the diversity of Indigenous cultures that we have. And in British Columbia, we have actually a similar history of cultural diversity to Europe. We have 30 Indigenous languages in British Columbia, all of which are rather threatened, right, because of colonization. The other image there is kind of a West Coast version of what we call the common bowl, which is an Indigenous idea that you know, we all eat from the same bowl. We have these diverse cultures. We have Western people. We have a diaspora of communities from all over the world, but we're all eating from the same bowl. So I think that's a key idea. We had a lot of partners on the project. It took about 10 years to get the Ministry of Education and Childcare back to the table, because I was the lead writer for the previous framework that we had in BC. So eventually we started without them, and they joined in very quickly. We had the Ministry of Environment, we had Canadian Commission for UNESCO, we had the Specialist Association of the Environmental Educators, which is part of our BC Teachers Union, my institute, and an NGO called Classrooms to Communities. And we actually didn't get government funding. We got grant funding from the Pacific Institute for Climate Solutions. So that was a very cool development because we had the ministry on side, but they weren't the boss. The institute was the boss, and they were playing along with all the other partners. And why that's important, sometimes, you know, the ministry might have a directive, and that is not perceived positively by teachers, whereas our initiative was really received as co-generated with teachers. So what did we do? We did a comparative review of what other districts around the world were doing to see what was out there. And that informed us. But one of the big flaws, I think, and having worked in many Indigenous communities over the years, I have to admit that even our last kick at this didn't give credit to Indigenous communities the way we needed to do that. So what we did this time, we used a participatory action research approach, and we had 37 different consultations around the province over a space of 2 years, but the very first one was with First Nations. And the last one was with First Nations. That was key. You know, the first time we said, well, what do you think we need to do? And they gave us lots of good ideas. And then the last consultation was, well, did we do what you asked us to do? It's like a member checking, right? In addition, we had an online process where if you couldn't meet with us in person, and BC is a very diverse province, we did get around, to everywhere, the Yukon, Haida Gwaii, Prince George, we were all over the place. BC is as large or larger than Japan, so we were all over. But people could still collaborate with us online and give us feedback that way. So what were the key things? You know, my Indigenous colleagues always tell me this, and it sounds so simple, but it's so hard to do. Nothing about us without us. So don't consult when you're in the lead. You have to actually give up the lead and co-lead. And so I was very fortunate that I have such a good relationship with an Indigenous colleague who stepped up and did this with me. Consult broadly and have many partners. We thought we were going to be done in a year. It took 3 years, so take your time to do it well, right? And then lastly, acknowledge diversity and respect differences. I have to admit, even though I think I'm an ally for First Nations communities, I had my values challenged many, many times, and there were many difficult conversations even within our team. And I learned a lot from that. So I think that was the key to our success. So arigato.
Yes, thank you very much, David. I think it's unfortunately somewhat of a new trend, right? Now to really pay attention to the Indigenous voices, and not only, as Professor Yamaguchi mentioned in her speech, not only listen, right, but encourage participation in decision-making and co-leading organizations and projects. So thank you very much. For our fourth speaker, I would like to invite Heleentje Swart from RC Fryslân. based in the Netherlands. Heleentje is a program leader for Spark the Movement, RC Fryslân, who boasts 20 years of experience in ESD, in TWET, and higher education institutions. RC Fryslân puts specific importance on inter-organizational learning for sustainable development. And Heleentje and her colleagues developed a whole region approach for transformative change, inspired by the priority action areas for the UNESCO Toolkit ESD for 2030. And Heleentje, during the Q&A, will also be reflecting on how to collaborate with the private sector effectively. So Heleentje, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So first of all, I really want to congratulate you on the 20th anniversary of the RCE network. And I cannot stress enough how urgent and important this regional approach is for learning for sustainable development. And then thank you very much for inviting me and say a few words about Spark the Movement. And I'll tell you a little bit about why and how and what we are doing. So Spark the Movement is a program, a communal program for collective learning for sustainable development in the region. And it's run by all three universities in the region, both vocational educational training institutes and Association Circular Friesland. And this association comprises 188 members at the moment from all sectors of business, all local governments, educational institutes, and several NGOs. And because of their cooperation and action-oriented approach, they, we became the worldwide frontrunner for the circular economy at the moment, which we are very proud of course, but it also shows how much we still need to learn. 10.6 is not yet 100, and that's what we strive for. And to strive for that, to actually, we're very determined to realize that, we use this image. And this image shows that we have to find the imaginative power of the region, that we have to build new narratives for the future. Because, of course, we too have a lot of SDG-related challenges, depletion of the soil, salination, pollination, and also all kinds of social challenges like shops closing down in our region. We're an agricultural region in the country, in the north of the Netherlands, and young people going to the cities, public transport getting less and less. So social, ecological, and economic regions. But yet, look how beautiful our region is. It's bathing in the sunlight. You can see that on this satellite photo, with all the lakes and the islands and the canals, and even the World Heritage UNESCO, the Wadden Sea, you can see on this picture. So the big question we face is, how can we pass this beautiful spot that we dearly love and which is so directly connected to the rest of the world to the next generation? As an educational program, we thought we have to start simple and small. And we did so by collecting all the initiatives that were already taking place at schools, because there are numerous. And we tried to combine those initiatives into projects with other stakeholders in the region. So combine the individual initiative of a teacher to start a small vegetable garden in the courtyard of in the playground with a municipality or with a local neighborhood or with any other school. And by enforcing and making this project more visible, the impact and the awareness grows that sustainability is also something very practical. It's not something abstract. It's something that you can do right here, right now. And this awareness really grew during the project. But of course, we're not there yet, because the project, well, we all know when the money runs out, it's gone again. So we also thought, how can we make this normal in the 21st century when there are so many challenges? How can we make it normal and systemically and structurally embedded in the region, that this is the way how we should learn? And for that, we developed the whole region approach. And as you can see by its colors, for those familiar with the UNESCO toolkit for ESD for 2030, it's derived from the priority action areas. And we set in the middle a regional challenge, which I already told, they're numerous. And we built transformative learning processes around those regional questions. And we did it as multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder, but also multi-level. Academics together with vocational education training school students. And applied universities with academic universities. And multi-generational, which I also think is very important, because we are all learners in the 21st century. And then we also scaffold, so on the top, what is it, left, right, I'm always mixing up. In the top you can see an old farmer telling about the bio-based crops that were used to grow in the Fryslân, and a group of students from all those different disciplines learning from him and thinking along how to build new business models with flax, with hemp, with cattail. Then we scaffold the teachers, the educators. Our experts in our network, they develop all kinds of courses on pedagogics, on how to work with, how to build up a network, how to maintain the network, and how to accompany multi-level learning processes. And then, of course, we also think and see that it's important to make new agreements, new policies about how to arrange that kind of transformative lessons, learning processes in the region. So here on the other corner, you see the signing of the educational agreement Fryslân for broad prosperity. And then, of course, we want to know whether we make any local action, whether something is actually changing in the region for the better, and whether our youth is getting empowered and develop the knowledge and the skills and the attitude that they need to become transition builders. So that's in short my story, and I would say thank you very much for listening. If you want to know more, please reach out to me or to my colleague Max Eisenbart, who's here in the room as well, or come to one of our workshops. We are very much pleased to be here and already got very much inspired by all the stories that you already shared. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Heleentje. I think the issue that Heleentje brought up about youth, the internal migration, right, and youth leaving rural areas in pursuit of a better life in the cities, right? It's a very big problem in Japan, Korea, other developed countries. So this approach could be very well adapted in other local environments. So thank you very much for sharing. And last but not least, our fifth speaker is Dominik Sprenger from RC Hangzhou in China. Dominik is the chief representative of the Han Seidel Foundation, Shetiang office in Hangzhou, China. And his work includes promoting innovative approaches to sustainability education, such as gamified learning modules and cross-border school exchanges, while also fostering intercultural dialogue and building bridges between countries and people in Europe and Asia. Dominik, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy and very honored that I may be here today and be part of this big RCE family, and also have the honor to represent RCE Hangzhou. RCE Hangzhou is represented by a big delegation of 7 people sitting over there, and we're always looking for international cooperation in the area, in East Asia, but also worldwide. So this is how we try to contribute to the goal partnerships to achieve the goals. And that is also the reason why I, as a German national, are presenting for an RCE in China. I've been living there for 10 years and I feel very much at home there. The project I'm presenting today is our Sino-German teacher training project. So Hangzhou Foundation has been working in China since 1988, and in 2015, together with our partners at RCE Hangzhou, we started an environmental education project. And recently, we founded an alliance for ESD with more than 100 members, elementary schools, middle schools in the province of Zhejiang. And we do regular teacher trainings, and we invite international teacher trainings, but of course localization plays a key role. And all this would not be possible without our partners from NGOs like Green Zhejiang, also the Science Popularization Association. They're all represented here today, that take ESD out of the classroom and into society. So I was asked to present also what did not work. So I will show you how when I started working in China, had to learn my own lessons. If I had attended this conference by that time, that mistake wouldn't have happened. Because localization is key. That's what was said many, many times today. What I did at the beginning, I looked at best practice projects in Germany, and then I tried to transfer them to China. And then I remember in 2021, we did a conference with teachers, with teacher trainers in China, but we did it in a hotel, and it was rather theoretical. And we learned from that. It was a very high-ranking conference. We even had the vice minister of education of the province attending, but it's still not the same as going into the school. So that was the first step. From that time on, we always went into the schools to do our teacher trainings. When we had international experts, we first made sure that we had workshops with Chinese teacher trainers and international teacher trainings to prepare and localize what was going to be taught within these teacher trainings. And then implementation is key, of course. Take it into the classrooms. When you do teacher trainings in schools, you can even implement the students into the teacher training and get direct feedback and learn from each other. The next step, however, is taking the things that you've learned from the classrooms into society, as I alluded to. And here on the top right, you can see there was a huge event a few years back. Our NGO partners of RCE Hangzhou organized an event where students painted the wall along the biggest river in Hangzhou, the Qiantang River. And the topic was basically ESDs and local biodiversity. So this had a very big impact. We are also involved in a yearly event swimming through the Qiantang River to raise awareness for local water quality. And I took part. It took me 45 minutes to cross the river. It's a very big river, but most elementary school children should be able to finish in 20 minutes or 25 if they practice for it, which I did not do at the time. Another example of our teacher trainings I would like to show. On the bottom right, you see a game. It's called Escape Climate Change. We also adapted that from Germany, made a Chinese version, also adapted the contents to the local context, and then used it in teacher trainings. And one teacher told me that she used it in a class with psychologically challenged students. So this was a use actually that we weren't even aware of. Even the NGO in Germany that had developed this game was not aware of this, because it's a cooperative game, and this gamification of education allowed students, first it forced the students to solve riddles together and to work as a team together. And these psychologically challenged students, they finally were able to talk to other students. Like they would never participate in class, but this was a key moment where they started to participate in class. So this, I think, is also a very important dimension of ESD, psychological health, which has been has become a huge problem nowadays in many countries. So, and even, on the one hand, the policies in China are very supportive for our work. There's a policy called ecological civilization education. This helps our work. On the other hand, some of our projects have been mentioned in official government documents as best practice. And so I think this is something that RCE Hangzhou and all our local partners can be very proud of. Thank you very much, everybody. I don't want to make this too long. We still have the discussion part. And I'm looking very much forward to your questions and talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominik, and thank you. Let's give a round of applause to all of the speakers for these very interesting presentations. Now I know that you've been listening to a lot of presentations and you're dying to have a voice as well. So we'll move to the interactive session. If we can have our mentee on screen. Thank you very much. So our next question was, which sector have you found most difficult to work with? And we see it's a split between local government and private sector. Can you put a hand up if you voted for local government or private sector as the most difficult to work with? All right, I see a lot of people. Great. So it's nice that we have some people here today who actually have extensive experience working with local governments, NGOs, and private sector today. So I want to start maybe, Heleentje, with you, because private sector seems to be a hot spot, right? So based on your experience, how can we, because a lot of people here might feel skeptical, right? How do we bridge business interest with ESD or sustainability? So how do we do it? How do we bring these two sectors together and show them that collaboration can benefit both sides?
Yeah, there are many answers that I could give, so I have to choose. But I think one of a main driver why it works at our place is, I think, because entrepreneurs are aware of their role in changing beyond their own company, beyond their own organization. They also see that they have difficulty in filling up their vacancies because of the brain drain I already told about. And they face all kinds of other questions in their mind about materials, about scarcity of materials, about pollution, about rising costs. So by getting those questions on the table and by listening to those questions and taking them up to a higher level, so beyond the short-term interest of the company, but looking at what is the question behind your question, we were able to translate those questions to the educational sector. And by having circular cafes, for instance, with educators and entrepreneurs and youth, by the way, and by talking about the curriculum of the teacher, the curriculum of the schools, and the questions of the entrepreneurs, we could make matches. We developed small cards where what is your curriculum about and what is your question in your company. And we could make matches and people were going through it and they thought, hey, we could work together. And then when they worked together, they saw that those students, when they were in the company investigating the employees, etc., they were like catalysts for change. They raised energy and something happened. Something, yeah, like a spark started. So the role, the trust, Persistence, I think, is also very important. Translate the questions and building up trust. I think that's also a very important thing. One of our own former speakers told about breaking down silos, and you do so by carefully listening, investigating, and by building trust. Yeah.
So showing businesses that for their survival and if in the future, they also need to be a part of the sustainability movement, right? I think you answered some of the people's questions, because while you were answering the question, local government actually became the most voted sector. And I would like to ask Dominik, actually, because RC Hangzhou is working a lot with local government, with NGOs. The kind of pervasive problem that we hear a lot about today is how do we attract funding? How do we attract policy support? So do you have any strategies or advice for our audience today?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. So I think if it's about attracting government funding, the number one most important question is, I want to start with a quote. A wise man once said, politicians are very easy to work with if you know their problems. Does anybody know who said that? Abdul, do you know? Yes, you said it actually. You said it in our preparatory meeting, and that stuck with me. So that's the first step. You have to solve the problems that the politicians have to get their funding. And the second step is, how do you convince them that you solve their problems? That's another question. And you have to convince them before you actually solve their problems. I mean, you can have a good track record, but you have to start at some point. And if you have a new project and you want government funding, I think it's very important to do networking, to get in touch with the funding agencies. And it's not always obvious how to do that. I want to give a short example. Like last week, I attended an opening of a German robot company in China. And this was actually a very good networking event for me. At first glance, this does not have anything to do with ESD. But it was a big event, and politicians were there, politicians from the city government, also representatives from the German embassy were there, and all the many important local players were there. So this is one example. But this is, of course, it's very situational and depends on where you are. For example, in Okayama, everybody watched the video in the morning. I think maybe what's it called? The Naked Man Festival would be a very good place to network, because I think the atmosphere would be very good. Everybody is very relaxed there. And I already talked to one attendee today. He also took part already in the Naked Man Festival. And so maybe that's the next opportunity for us next February in the Naked Man Festival in Okayama for local projects. And then once you know the right people, you can get information from them about what kind of projects would they fund, what kind of projects are they interested in, and then you can also redesign or at least present your own projects that you're planning in a way that is attractive to them. For example, Hans Seidel Foundation is partly being funded by the European Union with a project on climate change think tank dialogue between Germany and China, and this is just how we did it. So we knew that there was the European delegation in Beijing, and we knew the people, and we talked to them, and we knew what kind of project they would probably fund, and then we applied. So this is the way, this is, I think, a possibility.
Thank you very much. I think we kind of in the hallways here also discussed how it doesn't necessarily mean to change your priority areas, but it's changing how you communicate them to other stakeholders, right? Using their language when you approach them as well. Thank you very much. Let's take a look at the next question. What would make it easier to collaborate with these sectors? So I see breaking silos and encouraging a more active and critical youth generation. Whose answer is that? Ali, please, can you please elaborate on your answer? Can we get a microphone to Ali?
Shall I give it?
We have our
That's
youth
not my role, of course.
supporters, so it's
sorry.
fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, so because I picked two options. First is youth, the sectors that is hard to work with. First is youth, and second is the government. So when it comes to the local government and government agencies in general, at least in Malaysia, and I'm sure in a lot of other countries, bureaucracy is the biggest issue, and silos is, very hard. So I think that's quite straightforward. But when it comes to youth, the issue with at least Malaysian youth, a lot of them are very, how do I say, dormant. They don't want to do much, and they also lack a lot of critical thinking skills. So without that, they just want to do, relax and enjoy, or just live. Go with the flow, study and then just get a job and then just retire and then, live an old life. But they're not really interested to be active or to do something or to do any change because they feel like they cannot do anything. So what I've been thinking and what I've been trying to do is try to encourage more people who actually try to do things, even if they can't make any difference today, but they try to do it again and again until they can, break out tomorrow.
Yes, thank you very much. This feeling of powerlessness, that is an interesting thing that happens when we raise awareness about the problem, but without the necessary tools and skills, people feel like they cannot really change the status quo, right? So it's kind of relates to what Abdul was talking about. I actually want to ask a question because you did mention, how do we make these in our education institutions, in academia, how do we create solutions that people can use and people know how to use, right?
Thank you very much. I think based on let me go back to that tally, that of local government. And then, of course, the problem is always, how do we get funding? Is on this side. And then how do we relate with the local government or government is always very difficult. That is the perception. But like we discussed, I think he reminded me that when we had this chat online, you see, politicians are the easiest people to work with, but very difficult also. So when you are too technical, then you have problem with politicians. And if you are too simple, you also have problem with politicians. You have to be expensive and also follow this thing, but technically you can go back and get your result. What am I saying here is, no matter how, they are very easy to work with if you have understanding of, they have time limit, they have 2 years, 3 years, 5 years too. So they want to achieve something. As a town planner, by my training, you plan for how many years? 10, 15 years before you see result. And the politician is having only 5 years. If he is lucky, he comes back another. So he's eager. So when you now think of providing just a document, this is a master plan that you implement for the next 30 years. Unless if somebody is very forward-thinking, he will look, my friend, can I have a project that I will build 10 billion and then I see the project standing? That is easier for me. But if you can coin your project around to achieve his objective and you also achieve your objective of achieving something, then you get their support. Then to come back to the issue of academics, just like you mentioned, this is common everywhere. And that is why we need to simplify this process. ESD and RCE movement, they are here with a very simple solution. That is why we call it RCE, Regional Center of Expertise on Education for Sustainable Development. And the interesting thing, Professor Zandvliet mentioned this. Professor Hans van Ginkel, one of the most outstanding people when you talk about ESD in the world. Believe in me, he took us a program when I was in UNU. Is somebody that will bring you from the lowest level to the highest level, and you will get it very clear. Education is not only about formal. It is formal, informal, and non-formal. When you catalyze these three, then you achieve sustainable development. What are we saying here is For academics to be able to have impact, their result or their research should be very community-based, with impact within the community that will see that result. So that is why whatever we do, for us to get this, no matter how, I'll keep on making reference to Professor Z. Not about, we have this mentality now common everywhere in university. I want to have journal published A rating, A, so that, either you publish or you perish in Africa, isn't it? If you don't have publication, no promotion, you can't be professor. But what about if you have a solution in community base that changes the life of people out of poverty? You should be more than a professor. So I think we need to look at that from that angle. We must be very proactive and forward-thinking in solving community problems. Thank you.
So maybe reimagining our approach to academia, right? And what kind of input or output is valued in academia. Not only focusing on research papers, which are important, of course, for generating knowledge, but also taking into account these community-based kind of solutions. And I see a response that relates to that, actually. We have to overcome different worldviews and values. The problem is the discourse of efficiency and maximizing profit is a main source of well-being. This should be explained in formal curricula. Whose answer is that? Can I see? Am I not seeing the person? Maybe they're not here. But this is interesting because you brought up that education is not only formal, informal, it's not only formal, but it's also informal and non-formal. And we tend to overlook, especially informal education, right? Because it's hard to track, it's hard to kind of have a standard for it, but it's very important for behavior change. Right, and I actually want to ask David the question, because this is mentioning different worldviews, and you mentioned working with indigenous people and how sometimes you even had a conflict despite being an ally, right, in your work. So how do we move beyond, as you mentioned, consulting indigenous communities or local communities and actually build trust? And I see a lot of responses here actually mention trust building as the main kind of thing that would make it easier to collaborate. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that question mirrors a question that a colleague, I've been working in an indigenous community called Haida for 20 years. And one of my colleagues came up to me and said, how do I do that? And I said, well, it's easy. You go there and you build relationships. And, that takes time. For me, it took 5 or 6 years before I was trusted in the community. And then, things started to change, but it's very relational. That's when you're working with indigenous local communities, you're talking about places that, I'm a white guy. I walk in, I kind of, look like the colonizer. So it takes time. So that's the first part, is developing relationships. And I'm working in an indigenous community right now, just outside of Vancouver. We have a new field school that's running. And I almost felt like this was replaying again, exactly. I walked into the community and I wanted to collaborate with the Squamish Nation, just north of Vancouver. And the same thing was playing, like we were having these meetings and so on. And then finally, I went to the school to have a meeting, like to the actual indigenous school. It's called the Cultural Journeys Program. And she was touring me around, and 4 or 5 of the teachers in the school were alumni of my Haida Gwaii program. And that immediately changed the conversation. Then all of a sudden it was like, oh, you really are serious about building relationships. And even in this last project that I was sharing, I said, we thought we were going to consult for a year. It took 3 years because it takes time to build relationships and all of that. So time and trust and relationship, there's no substitute for it. And then also going back to check whether you did what was asked, right? So not just walking away, but actually sharing the results of the consultation back in the community. Too often, academics don't do that. They come they extract information, they publish, and then they go away, right? Never to be seen in that community again. And that's just neo-colonialism, right? So anyway, I don't know if that's the answer, but that was my answer.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a big issue in academia, right? And Abdul, I think, partially covered it, but the knowledge creation, right, in academia, so that indigenous people and local communities are not just informants of our papers, right, but actually participate in co-creating the solutions. Thank you very much. Actually, Ali, back to your response on youth involvement. We have a separate question here about youth, and I saw some other inputs were also about youth. So what is the biggest barrier to meaningful, again, stressing meaningful youth involvement in your work? I see 48%, no sustainable funding. How many people said no sustainable funding? All right. Can I have one person who wants to share some of the challenges working with youth in relation to funding? Do not be shy. I saw a lot of hands. Any volunteer? Yes, please, Princess. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you for the insights. I think that we all have been young at some point. So just looking back to my own experience, they will tell you when you look for your first job, you don't have experience. But if you don't give me the chance to earn my living, what the experience that I will have to build that capital that bankers or my own family can support me and trust and move forward. I think that is a circle problem that we have. And that is one of the gaps that I'm addressing as well as a co-chair of the Paris Committee on Capacity Building within the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework on Climate Change process. I think that is something that is critical. We shouldn't overlook. It is a reality. And it's not normal that our youth today, they cannot project themselves having a family, having a home, and making sure that they can go and make a loan for that. Those are critical problems. If we don't address that issue, we will running into simply into economic growth problems. So that is the bit of share that I wanted to share with the esteemed colleagues in the room. Thank you.
Thank you very much for pointing this out. Yeah, youth these days face a lot of more issues than previous generations, and they definitely need more resources and capacity building to be able to address it, which is why the plenary session 3 today will focus on what is youth doing actually to change the world around them and what do they need to do more, perhaps, right? 24% here said no mechanism or system to engage youth. Can I see a show of hands who said that they do not have any mechanism to engage youth? I see our delegates from Spain, I think, right? Can you elaborate on that? No mechanism or system to engage youth. Can we get a microphone to, can you put your hands up? Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, I look Spanish, but I'm from Denmark.
Good. I remember Spanish delegation was sitting here. That's why. Okay, thank you. Denmark.
Yeah, so in Denmark we have a new group of young people, apprentices for sustainability that have been working for 2 years. But I see that young people nowadays, they have so many challenges of all kind of things. So they kind of broaden out, and I would just, in one hand, they want to do it themselves, and in the other hand, it would be really helpful for them to make some kind of bridge so they could learn from the experiences from the last generations, like me or a little younger.
So intergenerational collaboration, working together.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a big issue, right? And Ali, that's partially what you mentioned. Youth on one hand, want to do something, want to do more. On the other hand, they often feel powerless or do not have the resources or access to the rooms where decisions are made, right? Yes, thank you very much. And I actually want to relate, in relation to our youth discussion, want to ask Saki a question. As someone who was once a student, now a teacher, kind of changing the lives of the students around you, what are some practical strategies to make sure that youth involvement in our projects isn't just tokenistic, right? We don't just say, oh, we asked youth, right? But actually involve them in meaningful ways. What are some of your tips?
So as an English teacher in the high school, the biggest difficult thing is time and money, because students is very busy because of for the studies, and also they have their own activities after school. So it's very difficult as a teacher. And also, as the Roy said, the foundation is the second biggest problem in the high school, because of course, we have a foundation and it's allowed to submit and apply for the foundation to get some money for the activities. But it's for the 1 year or the next 3 years or so. So it's not sustainable for the students. So I would like to suggest, I know some private school has the network with the school and the company. And then they directly communicate with each other. But I would like to suggest to connect between school and business more stronger. Then students can have the opportunity to run not only inside the school, but also outside of the school. And then students can struggle with their critical thinking on their own.
So involving youth in more practical learning and project-based learning, right? Not only theoretical.
And bring what I
yes
can just a small contribution to that. Bring the knowledge into the community, out of the school, because then it gets practical, and you switch the letter key that young people feel, because then they feel that they are really part. And there's a reciprocity between what they learn and what they give to the community, and what they take from it. And this reciprocity, that's so important. We like indigenous people, we are used to talk about and to decide for, but it's about really listening and about really investigating and about really wanting to be in a relationship with young people.
Yes, Dominik.
Yeah, and for example, in China, it's probably similar. In other countries, there's lots of, for example, on students, there's lots of pressure. They don't have so much time. And it's very helpful if you somehow can make this involvement in societal work part of the school curriculum in some way. So we had a project for some time where students got kind of credit points for doing work that was beneficial for society, and so they could take it back. Or also to have competitions, because children are also, in a playful way, of course, not stressing students out, but having competitions. For example, we have a ESD language competition where students talk about sustainable development goals and practice their foreign language skills and get awarded. And this award also helps them maybe get an internship or whatever.
We really try to step down from challenges and competitions. And we really want to make space for breathing, for thinking in another way. And the ideas that are most promising, they should help the problems that are maybe too much out of the box to become more acceptable and be taken over. So I think it's also very important to think about the structures in how we look at that stresses the individual achievements of a group of students or an individual student. So it's difficult, I think, difficult to put that notion of competition to sustainable development.
Can I jump in with a comment here? Just relating the thread here, I think when you bring education out into the community and it's problem focused, certainly for students, it creates a different sense of empowerment and efficacy. And I find this is true even with the teachers that I work with. It's not that they don't have the knowledge, it's that they don't feel like they can do it. So a lot of our project has been about, giving some structure and some tools to teachers so that they start to feel like, oh, I can do this. So we call that self-efficacy. We're actually trying to measure that and see if we change that kind of measurable outcome in teachers, because we know that will lead to action, right? So.
Yes, and we know reports, actually UNESCO report is showing that teachers lack confidence in teaching climate change, right? So if you bring this knowledge and self-efficacy, self-confidence, self-esteem is growing, then people are more motivated to co-create solutions together. So yes, we should maybe rethink how we approach education from the perspective of the teacher and also from the perspective of students, like what's expected of students and what's expected from teachers as well. Thank you very much for this wonderful discussion. Last but not least, we have, we have your voices. So we asked you to name one game-changing practice for local multi-stakeholder collaboration that should be scaled nationally or internationally. And we see a lot of different responses. I see UNESCO story circles, open access in 7 languages, and training can be provided through the UNESCO chair or intercultural competence in Stellenbosch University. Whose response is that? Yes, please, can you tell us a little bit more? We are interested in that.
Sure, thank you. Darla Deerdorf, UNESCO chairholder on intercultural competence at Stellenbosch University in South Africa. And UNESCO Story Circles is a capacity building tool that our chair takes out across South Africa, the continent of Africa, and globally. In fact, I've been here in Japan this month of October in doing some training on UNESCO Story Circles here. And it's a structured yet adaptable methodology that brings people together, bridges divides, and really helps to practice key intercultural competencies necessary for us to work together, such as listening for understanding, instead of listening for reaction, which we typically do as humans. And UNESCO piloted this in all 5 UNESCO regions around the world. They wanted to see, does it really work with any group of people, anywhere, using little to no resources, financial resources. And they were very pleased with the results. And so now our chair is taking it forward. It's available in a downloadable manual in 7 languages, also an introduction video for 2 minutes that UNESCO put together as well. So I'm happy to talk with any of you who would like to learn more about UNESCO Story Circles. It's a wonderful way to bring stakeholders together, and it really has been a game changer.
Yes, thank you very much. Maybe we can discuss a few more. Do we have a volunteer who really wanted to share their response as opposed to reading them from the slide? Do I see any hands? It's a very unique opportunity to share with your peers, right? I see somebody mentioned transformative technology here. Having transformative technology, shifting consumption, production for sustainable development. Yes, Roger.
One way that things can change is sometimes there are transformative technologies that are also have network effects, and people end up having to change because it's disrupting the entire system in good ways. So, for example, in RC Saskatchewan, we're wanting to look at how we share productive equipment in communities, and there are things like resource libraries and so on. But it's also shifting the ethics around how we even see our equipment. In a way, it's about humanizing the environment, including our equipment. And as soon as you have a small community or a university or whatever, where you actually have a community of care for the equipment, well, then maybe we also start caring about each other. Maybe we start caring about the environment, because currently our model of ownership, our model of using equipment is a slave model. Right? But we talk about autonomous equipment. Well, then actually, why not have
equipment volunteering, right? Because if the RCE movement is built around volunteerism, and we've gotten so much out of that model from the not-for-profit sector, but all of these nonprofit organizations, they don't have money. Humans can volunteer, but the equipment can't until you actually create a technology that liberates the equipment so that if you're having a community barbecue, so many people are volunteering to show up and cook and what have you, but the barbecues are volunteering, right? You've got a whole network, and that will change everything because all of a sudden the nonprofit sector can fully embrace an entire way of mobilizing human capital and physical capital without needing the money. And that will change everything. But once it changes, it's like you want intergenerational knowledge transfer, have all the people in the community sharing equipment. Well, that brings everybody together. And the old timers will say, well, yes, this is how you use this kind of piece of equipment. In fact, to use it, you need to have an old timer there with you because we aren't going to let you use it until you've got the training and what have you. But that shift, you know, it's a technology that, okay, now if you're a business person, it's like I used to build a huge factory with all these sunk costs, but now the small enterprise is able to basically mobilize a whole equipment set and just pay it wages, right? It doesn't need a $500,000 loan from the bank. It's like, no, here's this equipment that we can use immediately. Well, what happens? Now the large investment in the big factory, it's like, no, our costs of a loaf of bread are 40% higher than this person who's mobilizing solar ovens for 20 cents an hour in off hours. You see what I mean? That then all of a sudden people will come to you. Oh, yes. And we have an overbuilt physical capital economy. You need to, basically, what we do to labor is make it as efficient as it possibly can. Well, then let's make our physical equipment have to work as efficiently as humans are having to work. That's what I'm thinking of. And it's not just physical capital mobilization. We talk about money, right? All cryptocurrency and all this stuff. It's such a transformative technology, but it's like, well, why not we think about currency for ethical uses? Why can't we build a sustainable development currency where, you know, the person who gets the loan isn't the one who can pay back the most money on the loan. It's what is the most sustainable proposal, right? You know, a lot of technologies like that, not just physical, but human technologies that will change. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, I really like the fact that you brought, you keep bringing points about technology, right? That to this discussion, and it's a very important point. I think that tends to get overlooked, right? How do we treat physical equipment, as you said? If we start there in this more controlled environment, then it scales up to public spaces, and then society as a whole, and et cetera, right? So thank you very much, everyone, for your inputs. You still have access to this QR code. So if you want to take a look at other responses and save them to your devices, please feel free. As I mentioned in the beginning, our leading question was, as we look ahead, what practices in multi-stakeholder collaboration do we keep, stop, or introduce to advance ESD and drive societal change? And I think we talked a lot about intergenerational, intersectoral collaboration, starting building trust, and really moving beyond consulting with one another, but actually engaging in decision-making processes and making more effort in communicating with each other in each other's languages, right? So thank you very much to our speakers once again. Let's give them a round of applause, and thank you all for participating in this session. Thank you very much.
We've just witnessed a very meaningful and creative session. Dr. Nafir, Isabel, and the distinguished speakers, thank you very much. And everyone, let's give a big round of applause to everyone who gave a presentation and speech today.